Welcome to the Life Matters podcast with enlightening conversations on success and living well. My guests are all motivated by the desire to make a difference, and they share their wisdom, personal journeys, and a host of practical guidance that we can apply in our lives. Subscribe on your favourite platform and never miss an episode. Today's guest is Dr. Amna Khan. Amna shares her experiences of what life was like growing up as a Muslim Pakistani in Manchester, how she became head girl of a Catholic school, and her academic journey. We talk about how she has become a leading media commentator on consumer behaviour. And for me, the highlight is her powerlifting journey to British champion. This really is a fascinating conversation with too many highlights to mention. Welcome, Anna. I'm delighted to be talking to you today.
Thank you for having me, Dan. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast.
Can you tell me a little bit about what life was like for you growing up? What shaped you?
Growing up, I grew up in inner city Manchester, Cheetham Hill. And there were lots of challenges then. We were a working class family. My mum and dad worked really hard to establish their own business. So they were working long hours, and I went to school in Manchester. I grew up in Manchester. I'm pretty much made in Manchester. Everything happened for me in Manchester. I've only had a short stint of living abroad when I lived in Shanghai for 6 months as part of my PhD. But growing up, it's been all about Manchester, and I really have been in the culture and ingrained in the way that life is in Manchester, whether that be because of my ethnicity and being British Pakistani. But a lot happened for me in this city, so I am really close to this city and it means a lot to me. Mum and dad really shaped my life. They were key teachers for me. They taught me a lot about faith, and that is one of the strongest groundings for me. My faith means so much to me. Being Muslim means the world to me because it really gives me my identity. It's where I get my principles from, what defines me, and the core values that I have. So they were really key on making sure that Islam, being true to being a Muslim and the true principles and values of that are in my life. Because I do believe that religion, it's there to guide you through life. It's your first lesson, your first teacher, your first instructions, your manual, basically, of how you get through life. And I think Islam does that beautifully. The way that it talks about relationships, the way that it talks about family and communities. And it talks about you as an individual and what your purpose is here in life. And I think that really has helped me through my highs and lows. So they taught me a lot about faith. Faith is incredibly important to them. And I feel blessed and gifted that they have given me the gift of faith as well. They also taught me a lot about family, because family is really important to my parents, and the way that we operate in a British Asian community, in a British Asian ethnicity for Pakistanis, family is very important, and those relationships are important. I think that family really supports you. That's what it's there for. Your family's there to hold you together, especially when things get challenging. But they're also there to celebrate your best parts of you and what you mean and what you are and who you become. So they really taught me about that, and they always talked about the family unit and making that family unit strong, and respect for each other and what each other believes in. Because obviously I've got two sisters, one's older, one younger. They've grown into very different women, and I've grown into a very different woman, and we all respect each other's journey, but we also respect what each other has become, and what each other wants in their life too. And the final thing that they taught me about is what I would class as fortune, and the way that you look at, say, wealth and success. And success was never defined by money. It never was. And I think that goes back to my faith as well, because success can't be defined by money, because we believe that this life is temporary. So if something is temporary, you can't fixate on wealth, especially not monetary wealth. Wealth is accumulated by the deeds and actions that you do, the way that you conduct your character, and the way that you treat others. And for me, that is the most important thing. How do you treat other people? How do other people feel when you're around them? And how do you leave other people? Because at the end of the day, you're going to leave this world. We live in a temporary world. And what can you give? And what is your legacy? And your legacy is definitely not money and success in that way. It's about what you build for the future generations. And it's about all the acts of good that you do. Charity is what you leave behind, and charity comes in many ways, and I think that's what's key Like, that's really the key principles and defining things that I would say that mum and dad has really ingrained in me.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. So thank you. You mentioned you have a PhD. Were you always academic? Did you love school? Have you always been a consumer of learning? I'm curious.
Oh, Diane, when I was in school, I had a real journey of the way that I was shaped and evolved through school. So I started off at school, primary school. I was really studious and always, very wanting to get all my spellings right and making sure my reading book was always read and wanting to read to myself and read to anybody who'd give me an opportunity. And then I went through my rebellious years. The teacher could just not contain me. It was like, what has happened to this girl? I was the person who would just be the challenging one in the class, disruptive, because I would be disruptive because I'd ask the awkward questions that nobody would ask. And looking back, the school system is built to develop a certain type of person. And I was that certain type of person, but I also had that rebellious, disruptive nature inside of me. And I think that really defined me because I would normally challenge and ask the questions that people wouldn't ask in the room. But I will remember a conversation with one of my teachers because I remember going to high school and I'd been good for a couple of years and then I became the naughty girl, right? And I was the one always in trouble. And my teacher, I remember Mrs. Hutton, she took me out of the classroom once and she said to me, you could be so much more if you didn't just try to disrupt the class every single time the teacher tried to do something. You've got so much to offer. And really, you are just holding yourself back. So if you give yourself a chance and if you stop trying to interrupt the class, we'd actually make a lot of progress, and so would you. And she had that conversation with me, I remember in year 9. She goes, because what I'm trying to think of is, Amna, is I'm building a cohort of students who I want to sit maths GCSE a year earlier. And I'm really not sure whether you're one of the ones I'm going to put in the cohort or not. So what's it going to be, Amna? And I was just looked at her and I went, I'm going to be in the cohort that does it a year earlier. And she went, are you? I went, yeah, I am. And she went, okay, well, I need to see a massive change in the way that you respond. She goes, because I don't have time to deal with somebody who is completely interrupting my class all the time and being disruptive and challenging when I just need to get through 2 years content in 1 year. And I was, yeah, I'm up for it. And that was it. That was a changing point. I was like, she's here to help me. And I need to work with the teachers to get through this process. One of the things my parents used to always say to me was that your teachers give you knowledge and they're a gift and you always respect them. So when I went through this disruptive nature, Diane, oh my God, my parents were at their wits' ends. Why are you not going there and just listening to your teachers? They're trying to help you. And I was, well, it's not really cool to just go in there and listen to your teachers, is it? Sometimes it's cool to be disruptive. And I used to enjoy doing that. I did. I was the naughty, rebellious one. And then I literally just belt and braces. I was just put your head down, get on with it, get some really good GCSEs. And the story was just fascinating because I'd become the naughty, rebellious one. And then after a year of me doing the early GCSE with Mrs. Hutton, the maths teacher, I remember we used to have after school classes. I'd go back to them. I'd go back to the extra tuition. I was there to put in the extra work because I wanted that GCSE. And I said to her in a conversation, like, Miss, wouldn't it be amazing if I was like the first British Muslim girl? Like, not even British, I said at the time, because I didn't identify. I just knew I was British. I said, first Muslim girl in a Catholic school to be a head girl. Wouldn't that be amazing? And she went, would you like that, Amna? I said, yeah, I would. I'd love that. And she went, why would you like that? I said, because it's something that people don't think about, Muslim people being representatives in Catholic schools. And I want to be the first to do that. And I'd love to speak in front of the whole school because a head girl does a speech and I'd love to do that. And she went, okay, it's nice to know that, Amna. And what I didn't know then was that there was a number of teachers at school who really were fighting my court when there were many girls in my high school who wanted to be head girl. And it was a decision that ultimately came down to what the teachers put the case forward for, who would be the best person to be the ambassador for the school. And it was a moment in your life when you think anything's possible. And when they said to me, you are going to be head girl for the next year, I was so moved by that because it was something that I used to pray for quietly. I used to want it and I used to pray to God, like, please, God, that'd be amazing if that happened. And when it happened, obviously it was a gift from God, but it was also a real milestone in my journey, which taught me that anything is possible. You're a Muslim girl who's going to a Catholic school, and we had mass all the time at school. We had lots of things. I got an A for religious education. I was really into it. It didn't matter that it wasn't my faith. What mattered to me was that I was learning about, being Catholic and the principles of being Catholic, and they were so similar. So being able to be a head girl there then, that taught me a lot about what I think my journey evolved into, because I'm always having this narrative of being the first to do this, being the first to do that, changing this and shaping that. So yeah, that was a moment. And yeah, I wasn't studious. I was rebellious. I had a journey. Then I went into A-levels. Did my A-levels, went on to study at Manchester Metropolitan University. I did a BA Honours with an internship, and I was really lucky to get a industrial placement with AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals in marketing, digital marketing at the time. Didn't know much about it, but managed to just get through that year. And then on to a master's at Alliance Manchester Business School, where I did marketing, and I found consumer behaviour and fell in love with it. And one of the reasons I fell in love with it was because the teacher in New Home, who taught me at the time, the way he explained consumer behaviour, you couldn't not fall in love with consumer behaviour. He just had such a passion for it. And when he came to academia, he had a life in work. He'd worked all his life, and he decided to come to academia. And I think he did about his last few years of work in academia. So I think he came when he was in his 60s and then retired there. But yeah, he was really instrumental in me finding my passion and love for consumer behaviour. I remember walking out of his first lecture and going, that's my subject. I love it. I just love what he's teaching me. And then along came AstraZeneca again with a scholarship for a PhD, which was to study the Chinese market. And you could define the subject. And I studied trust in relationships in the Chinese market. They were in the B2B context, but much of the learnings in the PhD that I've done with AstraZeneca and the research that I did is transferable to what is happening right now in our society with trust between organizations, brands, businesses, and creators and individuals. And I always say this, life comes full circle, because there's so many things that have happened in my life that have come full circle.
You're fairly frequently on television and in the media, aren't you? And I believe it's one of the questions that you most get asked, so I must ask it. How did you find your way into television and other media? How did you get involved in the first instance?
It came as a bit of a surprise going on to TV and getting involved in the media. When I first started working at Manchester Metropolitan University, we have these internal meetings where you discuss your research with all the rest of the academics, and the academics then scrutinise your work. And it's a way of getting feedback, it's learning, it's refining your research to make it better. And I was doing my first research seminar where I was going to present my research, and then it was an open forum to ask me whatever you wanted. And many of my academic colleagues took the opportunity to ask me questions. And one of the questions was quite challenging. And when I was asked that question, I went into the mode of, right, you're going to have to be short, sharp, and you're going to have to get your point across to convince the audience that you know what you're talking about. And so I went point 1, point 2, point 3, and summarised, and that was it. And unknown to me was one of the professors in the audience, Professor Kathy Parker, who I knew she was there, but I didn't think that she was, watching me for any reason. And I don't even think she was. She was just there to enjoy a research seminar. But I remember her saying to me that you will be great for TV. The way that you answered that question, you will be great for TV. And I was really chuffed with that. I was really happy with it. And she had already contributed to TV for many, many years. She was one of the key speakers for BBC Breakfast. She was always on the news. And Kathy, when she delivers, she's very to the point, eloquent, but she's very relatable too. And it, time went on, nothing happened. And then one day we were in our offices, and Kathy sat in the office just across the corridor from me, and she opened the door to the office that I was in, and she said, do you want to go on TV? And I just went, yeah, I want to go on TV. I'd love to. And she went, it's BBC Breakfast. I went, okay. I wasn't a BBC Breakfast watcher, by the way. I did not know that was the most watched show in the UK for breakfast at that time, and it had millions of viewers. So I went, all right, okay, just, water off a duck's back, because I don't even know what I'm getting myself into at this point. She went, right, I can't make it because I'm going to a funeral. I will pass your details on and go for it. Just go and do your session on BBC Breakfast. Anyway, spoke to the organisers and producers the night before, and I discussed what I was going to say. And then along I went to the BBC Breakfast show, and I was sat there and I was like, okay, what's this going to be like? And I wasn't sure what I was going to discuss. Anyway, you go into this small room, you've got lots of cameras there, there's people behind the cameras, you've got the red sofa, and you've got presenters on the red sofa. I sat down and they count you down 10, 9, 8, and they count you down to 1 and live. And I literally would only explain it as the baptism of fire, because I have no idea what I was saying at that point, but I know that it wasn't 1, 2, 3. Here's your summary. It was almost like, a bunny in headlights. That's how I felt. That's how I felt at the time. And I remember coming off, and lots of people watched me, colleagues, friends, family. And on that occasion, everybody was celebrating me, because they were like, oh my God, Amna's been on BBC Breakfast, and, it's great to see you. And my mum and dad's phone didn't stop ringing, because people were like, oh, Amna's gone on TV. It's amazing to see a British Pakistani face on TV. And then I came back to work, and it was the same sort of experience. Everyone was really happy and celebrating that moment. For me, I've not answered that question as best as I could have done. And I think a bit of it's critique, but I genuinely believe that I really wasn't delivering my best. Anyway, time went on, a couple of years went on, and I got another phone call from BBC Breakfast about 2 years later. And at that time, I'd had my son, and my husband then worked away, and they asked me to come on, and I made every excuse you could possibly think of. I gave them 3 different names. I said, you can go to this person, this person, this person, and they'll do it for you. And they went, we've already spoken to them. They haven't got time. And then they said, just let us ask you some of these questions. And they asked me the questions, and I answered them. And then I said, well, I can't do it because I've got to drop my son off at nursery. And they went, well, what we can do is we can reschedule your slot so that you can drop your son off at nursery and then you can attend. Oh my gosh, this is really not working. I was like, how am I going to get there? Because I've got a car, I don't know where I'm going to park. They went, no, we'll sort that out. Don't worry, we'll get you a taxi. The taxi will pick you up, drop your son off, take your time while you're dropping your son off, get back in the taxi, come to the studio. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to give up. They didn't give up. And okay. And I went, okay, fine. The way I thought about it was, I'm either going to do amazingly well, or they're not going to call me again. So what I worked out was I was really going to do really, really well, or I was never going to hear from them ever again, because you can't get it wrong twice. That I knew. So the night before that interview, because I now knew how many people were going to watch it, I knew there was millions of viewers. I also knew that this might be your last chance. I didn't sleep all night. I was in and out of the bathroom all night. I was anxious. It was my anxiety. I'd also prepared so well for this interview. I prepared for the one before as well. And I prepared belt and braces. I'm going to give it my best shot. And there's nothing that's going to come between me and the answers to those questions. I am going to deliver my best. And if they don't call me again, that's absolutely fine. Anyway, the night I was counting down the hours, I was nervous, I was anxious, and I was a bit worried that, this is me. I'm an academic. I'm supposed to know my stuff. I'm now going on national TV. I also know that most of my colleagues watch it. Most of my family and friends watch it. And there it was, all my credibility, the authority you have as an academic, up on display in front of the UK population and anybody else who watched it if it was captured and put online. So off I went to the studio, got mic'd up. I knew what was happening. They take you to makeup, you come round, the producer's going to speak to you, and then you go straight in. And I sat on the red sofa. This time I sat on the red sofa and not at the business desk. And I remember answering the questions, and I remember going 1, 2, 3, summary. The difference between this, and this is why it matters, and summary. And as I was taking my mic off and returning it, I knew I'd done a good job. I knew that, Diane, when I'd delivered, I knew I'd done my best, and that was good enough for me. I'd done everything I could to make sure that those answers reflected me and what I could deliver on the day. And as I was passing my mic over to the team, the producer walked straight up to me and he told me it was brilliant. And he also told me I would now be on their VIP list, and if they needed a media expert, they would call me. True to his word, the next week I was on BBC Breakfast again because they needed someone for the breakfast news. And again, I delivered. And I guess the rest is history now, because coming on to, I think it's 12 years of contributions to the media. I've got over 1,000 contributions to national, international TV. And it just grew and grew and grew. I think COVID was a great point as well for me, because COVID took my media contributions to the international stage, where I was asked to speak for Chinese national television when Arcadia went down and Top Shot went down. And that was a time where I started to get interest from international media as well. When the Queen died, I provided a contribution to Canadian TV as well, their national broadcaster. So it really changed my profile. And I think the key message for anybody who wants to be in media is you have to know your craft. You have to know what you're talking about. That's key. That's why they ask you to come on as an expert. You've got to deliver something that, the average person might not know, but they also need it to be as relatable as possible so that the person on the other side of the TV screen gets it. But there's also something about doing the work and doing it consistently. With the media, you get invited to contribute. You can't go out there and constantly say, I want to be on TV, because it doesn't really work that way. You're invited to provide your expert knowledge and share that. But what I do know is that if you deliver well and you do it consistently, you get asked back, as I did get asked back. And that's how it rolls. It rolls because people start to trust you. They see a body of work. They know that you can answer the questions well, and they come to you because you can give them what they need and what their audiences need, more importantly, which is to be able to understand a concept and simplify it and say it very, very quickly if it's a media interview on TV or radio or for text formats. But the key message here is failure. The first one, I failed. I did fail. I know I failed. But it wasn't about the failure. If I let that failure define me, today I wouldn't have over 1,000 contributions. I wouldn't have spoken for international press. I literally had to pick myself up and get on with it. And I did it dragging my heels at the time, because I really did not want to go back onto TV. I feel like I was way out of my comfort zone. It felt uncomfortable. Felt like, my authority was going to be reduced to nothing with one interview, which said nothing about me really, because I have a body of work behind me. And it felt like a moment that I either could walked away from, and I tried my best to walk away from it, or it would define me. And it really did that. And it just showed me every single time that you're failing, you need to just pick yourself up and get on with it, because there's so much to come from it. And don't let that failure define you. So the key was, don't let the failure define you. Go and give it another chance. You don't know what's going to happen. And secondly, keep working at it. The more you do, the better you get. And the more credible you are, and people trust you. Trust doesn't happen over one isolated incident, unless it's a critical incident. It builds over time, and you've got to give it time. And that's the same for any part of work that you do. You have to build your credibility. You've got to earn your stripes. And once you earn your stripes, the trust will follow. And that's been a sort of journey that I've had to go on to experience that.
Thank you, because that's so interesting. And that second opportunity really was a defining moment, wasn't it, actually? Going ahead, doing it, putting in the preparation, having the sleepless nights, handling the anxiety, doing all the prep. I mean, it paid off, didn't it?
It certainly did pay off, Diane. And it was part of knowing and understanding. The first time I went on, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't even know. I didn't watch the show. So it really didn't matter to me. I was like, I'm just going on TV. The second time, I knew the gravity of the situation. I knew what I was getting myself into. And sometimes when you don't have the awareness, it's easier. And I knew that on the first time, it was easier. I was just going on TV. The second time, I knew exactly what I was doing. And that made it a bit more challenging for me. But another thing that I actually reached out for was help and support. I went back to MMU because I represent MMU as an ambassador when I spoke to the TV and press. And I said, I need support in this area. I can't feel like I feel like this, because it continued to happen. Even though I went on the next week, I still had the anxiety. I was still worried. I didn't know if I was answering the questions as well as I could have done. I knew I answered them well enough, but there's always room to grow and learn. I asked if I could get some mentorship and some coaching, and then they provided the coaching. And then I met Kate Cocker, who was a media presenter coach and a speaker coach, and she helped me to learn how to craft my answers in a better way and how to speak publicly, because Kate then came into my journey a lot later as well, again, as to refine how I spoke to audiences when I spoke at events. So she was quite key. I think people need to appreciate that there's something that you can do, which is grow your confidence and awareness about how you see yourself and what you're going to deliver. But you do need professional support at some points because you are competing. So you have to be equally as good as the person next to you to be able to deliver and provide answers. And there's a way to answer those questions. And I also think that you have your own style and flair. I speak in a different way to other people. You have your own flair and the way that you talk and deliver your message. But essentially, you're trying to convey the same sort of points.
Thank you. I want to come in with a completely different aspect of your life now. As a power lifter, which will probably come as a surprise to many, me included. And you have a British record. Am I correct in saying that? Can you talk to me about your powerlifting, your record, how on earth you even entertained this as a thing to do? I'm really interested.
Diane, my powerlifting journey just happened by accident. And I think that you have some beautiful accidents that happen in your life when you just give it a go. And I think powerlifting was one of those examples. I used to have gym anxiety when I first went to the gym. So I started going to the gym when I'd had my first baby because I had put on some baby weight. So like many women, I'd had a pregnancy, my body shape had changed, and I went to the gym. And I started to work out, and I had really bad gym anxiety. And then I got myself a personal trainer, Dev Payne at the time. We went to Stretford Pure Gym, and he trained me to learn how to get more fit and, lose my baby fat. And then I wanted to start doing something that was goal oriented rather than just coming and him teaching me how to lift some weights or use some machines. I actually wanted to set myself goals. And it's when I set myself goals that the way that I treated the gym fundamentally changed as well. Because before I was going, obviously the goal was to lose weight, learn how to use the machines, learn how to do some lifts. And then I set myself some goals. But to do those goals, I had to go into the weights room. Now, the weights room was where the anxiety literally turned up to 100 because I did not want to be in a weights room which was predominantly males, grunting, hissing, sweating, shouting, you name it. It was going on in that room. And it was loud and there's weights clinging and clanging, and it just didn't feel like somewhere I wanted to be. And so I resisted and I was kicking and screaming all the time with my coach saying, I don't want to go down there. I don't want to go down there. And eventually he would just take me kicking and screaming and saying, look, if you want to reach these goals, you're going to have to go down there. What I did is I set myself some goals, and my goals was to lift 100 kilos in a deadlift, to lift, I think it was double body weight in my squat, which was about 90 kilos at the time, 94. I didn't even know much about bench then, and I wanted to shoulder press because I used to love shoulder pressing. Anyway, we set those goals and I started to do his training plan. And what I would do, so I wouldn't have to meet the men or when it would be less busy, I'd go at ridiculous times in the morning when you know that the gym's going to be empty, so I didn't have to meet any of them. And it would be really quiet at that time because the gym was 24/7. It was just like a luxury to just go then at that time, so nobody would know that I was in the gym. Or I didn't have to be around those men that were there in the evenings and they were hunting around, hissing and chucking weights all over the place. And I remember saying to Dev at the time, this plan's working really well, and we train together every Sunday, and this week I've done 87.5 for 6 reps. And he went, no, you haven't. I went, I have. I've done 87.5 for 6 reps. And he went, you haven't done 87.5 for 6 reps. He goes, you must have loaded the bar wrong, or you calculated the weight wrong, which I did often. I will admit to that straight away. I did do that often. Our maths never worked for me. I used to get confused with the numbers. So I was like, no, I did. And he goes, right, we're training tomorrow. It's Sunday, Amna. And I went, I know it's Sunday. And he goes, and you're going to do 87.5 for 6 reps in front of me. And I went, I'm going to do 87.5 for 6 reps in front of you. And he was like, okay, let's do it. Along comes Sunday, we start doing the training and I pull 87.5 for 6 reps. And his face was, what on earth has just happened? Because unknown to me, Diane, in 87.5 for 6 reps, you can easily pull 100 kilos. And I'd only been training with him for about 2.5 months at that time, taking me from lifting 50 kilos to 87.5 in a very short space of time and doing it for reps. And if you think about it, when you do 87.5 kilos, it's 87.5 kilos times 6. You just times it by 6 is how much you've lifted without stopping. That's how much you can lift. Not in one rep, no, but it's showing your ability of how much weight you can accumulate and pull. Anyway, after that, he was a bit in a daze. You didn't really know. It was okay, fine. Dev's a very quiet guy. He just sort of was absorbed what was going on. I thought, oh my goodness. And he went, right, okay, carry on. We carry on training. We'll carry on doing this. And he just carried on with the plan. And within a few months, I pulled it 100 kilos. It was rep day. So we were going to test the max and I was going to pull 100 kilos. Oh, he said to me, pull this 90 kilos for a rep. And I wanted to show him that I was really, really good. So I pulled 90 for 2. And then he looked at me and went, why have you just done that? And I went, because I could pull it for 2. So I decided to just pull it. Because, we're going to do 100 next. I said, yeah, well, of course we're going to do 100 next. And he goes, yeah, but you needed that energy to pull the 100. Okay, fine. Well, I said, I'll pull the 100 anyway. I'm sure I will. I pulled the 100. I locked the weight out. And then as I was putting the weight down, I dropped it and it hit my knee. Just as I was dropping it, it just felt like the rep was cursed and my knee hurt. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's just happened? And he goes, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. The next day, my knee started to swell and then it started to feel painful. And then I got an MRI done on my knee and they said that the soft tissue in your knee has inflamed or been damaged. I can't remember what the doctor said at the time, but he basically said, don't lift again. Your body's not made to lift. And that doesn't seem very convincing. I could lift before because it's just the way your body mechanics work. You're not really meant to be lifting that much weight and you shouldn't lift weight. Anyway, I stopped lifting because I thought the doctors told me to stop lifting. And I started to do other things like shoulder presses and other weights like that, which are a lot less load because it's harder to put weight over your head than it is to pull in a deadlift. But I had the itch. I just missed it. I missed it so much. I like going to the gym. I loved shoulder pressing. I loved the other activities. But all I was doing was building a stronger upper body. I didn't really train legs. I couldn't train squat. I couldn't train deads. I was tailored off very quickly relative to deadlifts because I started to feel pains when I started to squat. And today and now I know why I felt the pains because I was wearing the wrong footwear. I wasn't moving correctly. You have to move in a correct way to lift weight, especially when you've got it on your back. And that's been part of the learning process of learning what works for me in my lifting journey. So I had the itch and Dev and I continued to train together and the shoulder press kept going up and up and up. And many people don't know this and might be amazed to learn this, but a year after I had my son, I was involved in an accident where I was walking to work on Oxford Road and I was hit by a cyclist. And when I mean hit, the cyclist didn't even try to stop. They just mowed me down. When I hit the floor, the impact on the floor instantly broke the shoulder joint in my right arm. So I broke my shoulder across there. And I couldn't lift my arm and I couldn't do anything with my arm. So I went through a process of getting my arm fixed. I didn't get any pins put in. I just held it for 6 months in the same position because the consultant said if you hold it like that, it will. If you allow Mother Nature to do what it does well, it will do it. And you will find that your arm will heal itself. Trouble is, after it did heal, the scar tissue meant that I couldn't move my arm well, which meant that I had an arm that I couldn't put into my back pocket. I couldn't move wrong. I couldn't pull a ticket out of a car park machine. I couldn't do things that you do with your right hand. And so after a lot of physio and manipulation under anesthetic, I got a lot of my range back, not all of it because the consultant said to me, you've got more range than people usually have. We will get you to a range where you've got a lot of range. Today, I don't know the difference because that range and the extent of the range you never use. I can get my left arm right up my back and right to my shoulder, which is unusual. But that happened, and it was that accident that actually made me think, I'm going to put my body weight over my head, and I'm not going to have this shoulder injury tell me that I can't use my arm just as well as everybody else, if not better. And that was one of my drives to wanting to push that weight over my head. I never got to lifting 47.5 kilos, which is my body weight at the time, over my head, but I got damn close. I got to 40 kilos, which is pretty impressive for a 47.5 kilo female. And we were doing that and we were making progress. I started benching with him and we were making progress, but I missed deadlifts and squats. And so one day I just Googled powerlifting coach. No, I didn't actually. I actually Googled deadlifting a coach or squat coach, one of the two. I didn't want to do powerlifting. I wanted to learn how to squat and deadlift so I could use the lower half of my body better. So off I went to meet Joe Leons, my powerlifting coach, who took me to the championship and got me the record. And I said to him, do you think you could help me to squat and deadlift? Because the doctor said I shouldn't be deadlifting or squatting. And the doctor said that to you? I went, yeah. Because have you had any major surgery? I said, no. He goes, what's happened? And I explained to him what had happened. He went, just come into the gym. Let me see how you move. Let me watch you move and I'll be able to tell you. I went, okay. So he watched me and he was radar vision, front, left, right, behind me, every single way. He was watching my body and he knew what he was looking for. He goes, I can't see any issues with the way that you move. He goes, you are very tight in your hips and your joints, because we can work on that. There's lots of exercises we can do. I think I can make you lift and squat well. And on the same day, he checked my squat, he checked my bench, and then we moved on to deadlift. Because I remember saying to him, I used to have a really strong deadlift, and I'd like to deadlift again. And he said, so what was your deadlift? And I said, I lifted 100 kilos at 47.5 or something like that. And I dropped it on my knee, and this is how my injury came. Okay, let's have a look at your deadlift. So on we moved to deadlifts. And that was my passion project. I used to love it. Now, Joe's a powerlifting coach, so he understands the numbers. He understands body weights. He understands how much weight's on the bar. He also understands what the records are and what you're lifting to relatively to other people. So when I come, not deadlifted for a best part of a year and a half, and I deadlift with him, then we put 60 on the bar, put 75 on the bar, 80 on the bar, and get to 90, and he goes, you got gloves on? And I said, yeah. He goes, take them off. Because they don't really help you anyway. He goes, just take them off. And I went, I always use these. And he went, yeah, take them off. He goes, just get some chalk. You just rub some chalk on your hands. Because it does exactly the same job. Unknown to me, he's trying to get me to lift to competition standard. You cannot lift with gloves. You can lift with chalk. And everything else I don't have. Because do you have a belt? And I went, yeah, I've got a belt. So I pulled out a belt and it's wafer thin. And he just giggled and he went, let's leave the belt alone. I guess you don't need that belt because it's not going to help you anyway. I used my belt and he went, not today. You don't need to use your belt today. So we pulled 90. And he's like going to himself, puts 100 on the bar. He's got this little smirk on his face. And I'm like, what's going on here? But not registering. And then he goes, just go for the 100. And I pull the 100, put it back down, and he's laughing his head off, nearly rolling off his bench. And he just cannot stop laughing. He went, what are you laughing at? And he went, 100 kilos, like literally walks in off the street, 100 kilos. And I was like, is that good? And he went, is that good? Because you've just lifted more than your body weight on a lift, untrained. You've not trained for a year and a half, and you've come in here and you've just lifted 100 kilos. And I said, can we train together? And he said, of course we can train together. And that was it. We started to train together, and before you knew it, I was just so engrossed in this training. I loved training. I loved the journey. I loved going to the gym. I loved lifting the reps. Within a few weeks of doing the squats, the knee injury came back. And I knew if we didn't address the knee injury with the squats, it was definitely going to transfer to the deadlifts. It's a joint. It's your knee joint. You're going to have to look at it. So I went to the hospital, and it was Joe, I think, who said to me, go and see this sports physio. And the physio that he had recommended was a physio that he used when his arm had been impacted. And the physio had told him straight away what pretty much his diagnosis was, and went, go and get an MRI done. I'm pretty sure this is what's wrong with your arm. And he did, and it came out right. The physio that looked at me, he said, I don't see anything wrong with your knee joint. I don't feel any fluids building up on it. He goes, I think there's an issue with your feet more than I think it's anything else. And I don't even see it in your hips. Got some x-rays done, and it was the shoes that I was wearing. 2 of my bones were rubbing against each other. They were knocking against each other. It was hitting my knees. Something was happening. Everything was misaligned, basically. And they fixed it. They said, go and get some orthotics, get the lifting shoes, put the orthotics in your lifting shoes. You'll be raised. The orthotics will make sure your feet don't move, and you'll be in the perfect moving position. So whenever you load, your knees aren't caving in and the knees not taking all the weight. Because at the moment, your knees taking the pressure of the kilos. And there we go. There was a problem fixed. We started to go on to this journey of just lifting, and it was a lot more seamless than in body mechanics ways. I knew what I was doing. I was being taught how to move and lift the weight. The issue that I had when I first started lifting though was confidence. It was confidence to lift, and it was a fear of failure. I didn't really like the idea of failing. And I remember when Joe and I started training, and the mental blocks that I'd present to myself, which would stop me from moving on. So we went to the gym with Joe. I'd got the 100 kilos when I first started, and we started to put the weight on. We started to load the weights on, and we got to a weight of, I had to lift, I think, 120 kilos. And that's 2 reds on a bar, on the bar itself. I pulled 110 and he went up fast. Joe loaded 120, but I wouldn't move. And he looked at me and he went, okay, let's leave it there for this week. Next week, same thing happened. And he showed me the video. He said, watch this 110. I've been coaching long enough to know that 120 should move and should look out. He goes, so there's nothing to do with the weight. It's nothing to do with you not being able to lift that weight. You can lift that weight. You have told yourself you can. And that's why the weight doesn't even break the forearm now. Because you're not putting any effort in. I said, I am. I'm working really hard, but you're not. Because you are not working to get that weight up. Because you convince yourself every single time you go to lift that weight that that's too heavy for you and you can't lift it. Because I promise you can lift it. And he goes, I've been doing this far too long to not know that the 110 lifts like that, the 120 breaks the fall. There's no way. Anyway, we went through lots of different motions of changing the position, doing different things. And then one day, I think the next week, he just got me to lock out. I think it was 110 and he went, just stand there with it. He goes, you're not putting it down. And I think he counted for about 7 to 8 seconds. And I was like, this guy's going to tell me to put this weight down. It's heavy. And I put it down and I was like, that was really heavy. And he went, yes, that's really heavy. But you've lifted it and you've stood still with it and you've not moved and you've not put it down and you've not broken your grip. Nothing's moved in the sense that you've got that weight up. You've stood there stationary. You've held it for a very long time. That is heavy. And to hold it and lock it out for a long time, it is heavy. And he goes, and again, my point is, you can lift that 120 kilos. You've told yourself you can't lift it. He goes, that's how heavy the 120 kilos will feel when you break it off the floor. Just lift it. Anyway, next week, 120 kilos goes because I don't know. I was telling myself I couldn't do it, and I couldn't do it because I told myself I couldn't do it. You know, if you tell yourself you can't do it, you can't do it. If you tell yourself you can do it, you can do it. There's sometimes where you don't have the ability and you don't have the performance and you don't have the strength to lift a weight, and that's okay. But then there's sometimes you've got a mental block and you tell yourself you can't lift the weight. And I told myself, you can't lift it, Amna. And once we got over that, that was a huge turning point because all of a sudden, Joe had told me something and he taught me something in the process. He said, if you fail the weight, that's okay. Because if you fail, I know where you are. I know where your strength is at that point, and I can fix it. We can get you stronger, but I need to know where you're at and your true strength rather than the strength that is blocked by mental blocks. And after that, Joe couldn't keep me away from wanting to try weights. I was like, I want to try this. Not yet. You're not ready. But if you want to, you can go for it. He was very encouraging like that. If I wanted to walk in the weight room and say, I want to try this, as long as it was reasonable and sensible, he would always let me have a go because it was a partnership. It was a partnership in me understanding myself and him understanding me. And one of the beautiful things about training with Joe was that he actually knew where my strength was at better than I did most days, because he understood the science behind it. I understood the emotional feeling and what I felt in that moment. He definitely understood the science, and he understood if she lifts a triple in this, she can lift that. If she lifts a double in that, she can lift that. And if she does this in that, and if she does her back ups like this and she does that, she can do this. And he was very good at understanding that. And that was a journey in itself of learning. And I just embraced failure after that. It's just a bit like, oh, didn't go up. Oh, that's annoying. We'll fix it in a few weeks' time. And I remember testing maxes became something that was exciting rather than something that was filled with anxiety. It used to always be, oh my God, I'm going to test this, and what if I don't get it up? So Joe would always say, what if you don't get it up? If you don't get it up, we'll get it up in another few weeks. We just work at it. We just work at what you're not strong at. We identify where your weaknesses, we build them, we get you stronger, and we build. We build together. And that's what we did. We built a deadlift together. I couldn't have done it without him. I don't know the science of powerlifting. I don't know how to calculate weights. I don't know how to work out what ratios I should be working at. Once I sorted out my fear of failure, I was able to make progress a lot quicker. And Joe and I had developed a trust in that relationship. And the relationship was that he would always build the plans that would allow me to get to the point where I could lift as much as I could, but I wasn't exhausting myself and I wasn't maxing, and I wasn't getting to a situation where I was fatigued more than I could cope with. And that was one of the key things. It always became challenging, but pleasurable at the same time. And that was the thing with lifting. It became a joy. It was the joy of my life. It was the escape to many things. It was the place where I felt happy and content. I was doing things that were allowing me to stack up my little goals and reps, and every rep helped me to move forward, because it's a game of reps. I believe it's a game of reps. Your journey on becoming a deadlift record holder, a squat left record holder, bench, whatever it is, and it moves beyond powerlifting. It's how many reps have you done? How many repetitions have you done of this? And that goes for speaking, goes for media contributions, it goes for lectures, writing, researching. How many times have you done this rep? And how many times have you done this rep intentionally? Because there's something when you're just doing things for the sake of doing things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going there and giving your best. And when you go there, give your best and try your best, and are intentional about how much energy you're putting into it, change will happen. And I genuinely believe that you just have to keep building the reps and iterations. And many people who come on this journey don't see it as a journey, Dan, and that's the issue. Everybody wants a destination. Everybody wants the trophy, the medal, the record, the 1,000 followers, the hits, the likes. What people forget is that you have to go on a process, and that process, in my opinion, is more valuable than the destination itself, because in that process, you learn about yourself. The things I've learned in powerlifting are so transferable to every other part of my life. To becoming a champion and to becoming somebody who's, interested in training or takes it as a passion, there's two very, very different levels of discipline and dedication that you have to put into one of them with. Fund your passion project. You'll do it with energy and enthusiasm. When you go into the competitive arena, which is what I was in, it was a discipline that was crafted with science. A lot of knowledge, expertise, and information goes behind that. I had to be ruthless about absolutely everything. I had to monitor my sleep. I had to monitor what I was eating, how much I was drinking, how many steps I did a day, how many reps I was putting in, was I doing all my training. When I went for competitions, I had a nutritionist who would cut my weight. So I don't naturally sit in the 52 kilo. I'm actually very tall for a 52 kilo lifter. Most 52 kilo lifters are about 5'4". I'm 5'3", and those 3 inches mean a lot when you're shifting weight and your body weight. So I have a nutritionist who makes sure that what you eat is within your macros, within your calories, within your deficit to reach weight on that day. I have the coach, Joe, who I trained with, and he was the person who did all the programming from day one, and he was key. At one point, Joe was unwell, and I had to take on another coach for a period of time. And that's when I worked with Paul Marsh, who's a British England coach, and he was the person who coached me for a few months while Joe wasn't there. Joe did come back for the championship, and I was with Joe at the championship, and I was with Paul at the championship. I was really lucky. I had two coaches, not one at the championship. And that day in itself was one of the most enjoyable days ever. And I say enjoyable, it was filled with anxiety, but it was really a lot of fun to have Joe and Paul there to support me on this hurdle of my journey. The actual discipline of being an athlete, people don't anticipate that. That's a full-time role. Athletes are athletes for a reason. They do the things that everybody else won't do. And that's what defines you. What will you do? You know, it's a huge privilege and honor that I got to be a British champion. You know, I never even thought about that, Diane. I just went to win a record. I just went for a record. What God had planned for me was much bigger than I could have ever imagined. And I truly believe it's what God planned for me, but it's also what my mum prayed for. And I prayed for it. I didn't pray to be champion. I just prayed for a record. I was going to be amazing if I got a record. Please, God, make it happen. It did happen. I can't believe it. Sometimes I sit back and think that actually happened. Yeah, it did happen.
How much did you lift?
For the championship, the British championship, I lifted 158 kilos. For the regional championship, which is a story in itself, Diane, I lifted 160. Not many people know this story, but I was supposed to compete during COVID. I'd actually managed to lift the weight during the training session, which broke the record during COVID. And what actually happened was I was training during COVID lockdowns. I had my own kit, courtesy of Jordan Fitness. They had contributed some, I had contributed some, and I'd got a kit together. And I was training through COVID in the back garden at my mum's because we were in the bubble, and I'd entered a competition. I'd entered the competition, I trained for it, I was way on making weight, and that week my son got COVID. And I think the Tuesday, and I took him to the COVID clinics, you know, the big clinics that were set up. I drove him down there. No idea he had COVID. But the holiday camp that he'd gone to, they basically said, you know, because your son's been sick and he didn't want to come in today. He had a headache. He literally had a headache, a migraine that he went to sleep. Please, could you go and get a COVID test done? Because there's lots of children with COVID here now. That's not COVID. He's got a headache. But if they insist, I'll go and get a COVID test done. I drove him down on the Tuesday. We waited for the results. And I remember the call clearly. When they rang me up, it was Friday. I was competing on the Saturday. And they said, you've got COVID in your house. You can't leave. Nobody can leave. I went, are you sure? And he said, I'm absolutely certain you have got COVID in your household. You cannot leave. I was like, oh my goodness, COVID. Okay, he's got COVID. We're all feeling well. My son is feeling well at this point. COVID. People are dying from COVID. Anyway, I rang up the organizer and said, I can't come tomorrow. They said that I can't come because my son's got COVID. I'm perfectly fine, but I can't compete. She went, well, that's a shame, isn't it? You can't compete. You can't come. We were isolated and in our bubble and staying at home. Sunday night, I felt rough during the evening. And I remember being in bed thinking, I feel like I'm getting a temperature. No worries. You've got nothing on. You're on annual leave because it was my first day of annual leave. You can just rest it out. I remember going downstairs into the kitchen and I just collapsed. I collapsed on the kitchen floor. And I remember my husband at the time coming downstairs because he heard, and he grabbed a chair and he tried to put me on the chair and he goes, I can't touch you. You're far too hot. You're just too hot, Amna. He goes, you're burning hot. And I remember having a blackout, not being able to see. I could hear absolutely everything, but I couldn't see anything. And saying to him, I can't see anything, because he was passing me water and he was like, will you hold the water? And I was like, I can't see. I genuinely cannot see anything. And for, I think it was about 30 seconds to a minute, which felt like forever, I couldn't see anything. And I remember then going upstairs and I realized I had got COVID. Now I thought, okay, it's COVID. You'll have it for a few days. I got long COVID. So for a long time, I wasn't in the gym. I think it was the best part of 2.5 months. I couldn't go to gym because I couldn't walk to the end of the street. I struggled to breathe to get to the end of the street. We have a mall just about 5-10 minutes, maximum 10 minutes walk from here. I would have to stop about 3 or 4 times just to get to the mall. It was really difficult. So from going to my peak performance, setting a record, I went back into the gym with Joe and he went, you know how it starts? We check your maxes. We work out your strength and then we build. I went, okay, let's do it. I had lost 40% of my strength. I remember sitting on the bench and I was coughing and I was still struggling to breathe. And Joe just looked at me and he knew exactly what I was thinking. He knew I was thinking, I can't do it again. I have to start over again. And he goes, no, you're not starting all over again. He goes, I know how you lift. You know you can lift that weight. We can get you there. He went, I will get you there. He goes, I know you can do it. I know you've got a record in you, Amna. We're going to do it. He said a lot of other things during that conversation because I was just sat on the bench and he knew I was really disheartened. I don't want to do this. I said, I can barely breathe. I can barely get under the bar. And he goes, that's my job. It was. And the training was ruthless to get me back because the capacity in my lungs, I was really struggling. So he was timing everything on the reps, on the sets. He would be like, I'm still coughing. He'd be like, get under the bar. You can do it. And we went from under the bar, rest times, short rest times, back under. He was just growing and growing and growing and growing my capacity as quickly as he could. Also considering, how I was and how I responded. And then we got ready for the next competition. And before I walked into the next competition, I knew I could lift that weight because I think Joe does this with me. He always makes me walk in with confidence. You've already done it once. You've done it. Just go and deliver the goods on the day. I remember lifting that weight in the gym about 10 days before. And I remember he posted it on his Instagram because he was going to get it anyway in the training. And then I went to the competition. That first competition, my nerves were all over the place. I was very, very nervous. But when it came to deadlifts, I zoned in. That's it. It's me. It's going to happen. I'm going to do this. And the first weight flew, second weight flew, third weight a little bit tricky at the top, tiny bit tricky, and I pulled 160 kilos. And I went home happy. I was really happy because not only did I break the Northwest record, in that moment I'd unofficially broken the British record, and I knew I could do it. And to do it on a stage, to do it after a cut, I've worked with a nutritionalist who knew I could cut my body weight to the weight that was required for a national competition. I knew I could do it. If you've done it once, you can do it again. And I knew that I could do it at that point. The way that I always think about my life is I plan things, God plans better. If I went to that first competition where we had COVID in the household, just imagine if they didn't have a lockdown, I definitely wouldn't have pulled a record on that day because I remember the training session before it. The weights weren't moving as they should. At that point, I probably had the COVID. It just hadn't come out into my body at the time because the weights were moving slower. And this isn't where it's supposed to be. Just before your competition, you're ready. You're ready. You can pull anything within reason. It didn't feel ready. If I'd gone to that first competition, I would have won a Northwest record, only a Northwest record. I pulled the national and the Northwest record, and I knew I could do it. It just set me up for the national record, and I knew that I could do it. The joy then was when getting to the British to actually win the British too, which was just like the icing on the cake. I didn't even come for that, I came for my record. What a treat to be British champion too. So that's a story people don't realise. Journey's been packed and full of highs and lows. And there's been lots of lows where I could have gone, oh, it's not for me, I'm going. I could have gone, when I couldn't get over a mental block, I still continued with it. I could have gone after the first bout of COVID and just gone, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not for me. Who wants to work up another 40% of your strength after you've done it and feel like you've just taken 10 steps back? We could have left then. I've had more challenges more recently with my training kit being stolen from my car, things happening, sickness in my household. Just have to keep getting up and getting on with it because it's what you put in is what you get out. And I'm a true believer in that. You just have to keep showing up and doing the work. Joe calls it the work. It is work. If you treat it like work, you will get results from it. If you treat it like it's a pastime and a hobby, you'll get exactly that from it too. And this is why I say there's a difference between people who are actively passionate about things and people who are competing and obsessing about every single detail. I obsessed about every single detail to become British champion and to win that national record. I had to.
Joe sounds like an amazing man, and I had no idea that there was going to be so much wisdom in your powerlifting journey, I have to say.
Joe's a very eclectic guy. When you meet him, like, he's got tattoos all over him. He's a really cool guy. He's really funny. But he's a coach that you need to build yourself up and to get to a certain process, because he's been through the process himself. He knows the journey. He's a powerlifter himself. He knows what it means to be a powerlifter, and he knows that this journey is not just about physical strength. Those people who think that powerlifting is just a display of physical strength, it isn't. Your body is more than just muscle and mass. Your body works in very different ways. Powerlifting is actually a sport which is about your levers and the way that your body is. If you're shorter, powerlifting is amazing for you. You don't have to carry the weight as much. Whereas if you're taller, you have to lift exactly the same weight. If you're 6'6" or 5'2", if you're lifting the weight and say you're the same body weight, which you never will be, you still have to lift that weight from X to Y. Even if your body weight, they do a lot of things on body weight, but body weight doesn't reflect height. And height is one of the things that if you're short, this is a sport for you, definitely. If you're short and you've got small levers, get into the sport because you'll do well. Because that's the way it's built for them. It's sports that are built for certain people, and it's definitely built for them.
So how long have you held the record for now? Because it still stands, doesn't it?
The record still stands. I've had it for 4 years. I'm eternally grateful to God and to all the other competitors who haven't been able to get it. Thank you. But yeah, I've had it for 4 years. What I do know, Diane, records are there to be broken. Somebody will take that record, and I'm here for it. At the end of the day, you want to see people to progress and to challenge themselves and take it to new heights and to actually really go for things and make it their goal. The fact that I've had it for 4 years is really rewarding in itself, because I know it's a difficult record. I know that. I've been there. It's not easy to pull. I know that it's not easy to pull. You really have to work hard at it. And I know that, if anyone's going to break it, and I said this, it's my friend who is the actual British champion now, who holds the squat record and holds the bench record and total record. At the moment, she's probably the most likely person to break it. She's 5 kilos off it at the moment. I think if she trained and really focused on the deadlift, she could potentially break it. And to be honest, if she won that record, then she would have all the records at the same time. So, but who knows? It's, I might have it for another year. Who knows? I might have it 5 years. At the moment, it's 4.5 years and it's still mine. So, I'm really blessed and I'm really grateful for that. And, it's my small bit of history. It's my small bit of history that I've contributed to Britain's beautiful history, to be honest. To say I'm a British Muslim Pakistani who's lifted that weight, that's paved the way for so many other people. I've seen the sport with a lot more Pakistani, South Asian females in the sport. And that's what I came there for. It wasn't just about me and my journey. It's about the doors that you open for people after you. And I believe that a lot of Asian women have embraced sport, which is one of the things I want to do. Because for me, if I can do it, so can you. You just have to put in the work. And that's what is the difference between me and other people. I put in the work to do it. It's a way for a lot of people to grow and find themselves. I became Amna powerlifter, the then record holder and British champion. It's a journey of me discovering myself. And it was an amazing journey of discovery, because it teaches you so many things that are transferable. Sport is one of the areas that you don't just challenge your physical body, you challenge every single aspect of yourself. And you can do that in many different ways. For example, speaking will challenge you in a very different way. There's a lot of nerves involved in speaking. One of the things Joe always taught me was turn your anxiety into excitement. When you turn it into excitement, you'll start to understand that there's a different emotion attached to this, and then you will feel happier going into it, and you'll straight away have a different feeling and sensation. Because if you start to fear things, because anxiety is a way of fearing what's going to happen, you're going to hold yourself back in some way. Whereas if you're excited, you're leaning into that. You're running into that situation because you're excited to do it. And that's one of the fundamental shifts that I've always had now, is I'm not scared of failing. I don't fail. I literally have just learned so much about myself. And every single failure, every weight that's not gone up, every lift that I've not made has been a process of saying, where didn't it work? What was stopping you? And we built on that, and we've learned a lesson, And that lesson has guided better performance. And it's used as a failure as feedback. And it's the best form of feedback because it's directive and it tells you where you're going to learn next. So I'm not scared of failing anymore. And I do embrace and get excited about things. And one of the things that powerlifting did is it made me excited about speaking. I was always nervous about media contributions. I was anxious about speaking publicly. And a lot of work came from Kate Cocker to help me with that. But Joe, a lot of the lessons I learned from Joe and powerlifting also were transferable, and trying to understand how to manage my energy to make sure that I'm delivering what should be delivered in room.
Thank you. I've learned so much. So what's next for you, Amna? Where would you like to be? What have you got planned?
I don't intentionally go out and plan my whole life. A lot of things happen for me by happy accidents, trying things and learning that I like them and want to do them more. I didn't go out to be on TV. It was a happy accident that happened. We've talked about how I actually tried to avoid being on TV the second time. And then the happy accident happened. You know, powerlifting, I stumbled across it in the sense that I was trying to learn how to fix not being able to lift with my lower body and finding my joy for deadlifts with my personal trainer. Neither of us knew that I was good at deadlifts. It just happened. But one thing I do know is that change happens because somebody wants to change things. And I've always believed that you have to become the change that you want to see. And I became that change, whether that was in the powerlifting space as a British powerlifter, for Muslims, South Asians, ethnic minorities, or whether that's Amna, the Pakistani that's on TV, and lots of, you know, my friends' children or my nieces or family see me and think, yeah, I can do that because Amna's done that. I've always wanted to be that change that would help other people believe that they can do other things as well. For me, it's going to be to do more work in the space of speaking, TV, media, and that's a lot to do with work. I still love and enjoy powerlifting. I love deadlifts more than anything else, as many people will know. So I want to continue in the sports space, but I just want to continue sharing because as somebody who is an educator, worked in education for the best part of 15 years now, I just want to continue to educate, share, and learn from myself. And I don't know where this journey is going to take me on becoming Amna, because that's what I believe it is. It's becoming Amna, the academic, the speaker, the TV contributor, the powerlifter. I don't know what's next, but I'm quite content in what I've got at the moment. And for me, it's about building a legacy that will be aspirational for my children, because it is very much about what my children see, my son and my daughter. A lot of things that I do is to show my son and my daughter they can be done. They can be done. And especially for my daughter, because I genuinely believe that women have a lot more barriers than men. I do believe as ethnic minority, we have barriers as well. And I feel that, you know, my daughter will look at me and she will see that I have done things that have opened doors for her, but also for everybody else as well, because it's a much wider change that I want to see.
Well, I think that is such a worthy aim. I have no doubt that you will achieve that and much more. If people would like to connect with you or find out more about you, Amna, what's the best way for them to do that, please?
So there's lots of ways that you can connect with me. I've got an Instagram page, Dr. Amna Khan UK. My website, Dr. Amna Khan. There's my YouTube channel, which has a lot of my media contributions, which is Amna Khan, Dr. Amna Khan on YouTube. And LinkedIn is a great place where I actually contribute and share a lot of my insights and knowledge through posts. Again, Dr. Amna Khan. So just put me in on Dr. Amna Khan in most places and you will find me. And I look forward to connecting with whoever listens to this wonderful podcast. And I've really, really enjoyed talking to you today.
Gosh, I have enjoyed it so much. It's been fascinating from start to finish, and I think I feel hugely privileged that you agreed to talk to me. So thank you, Amna.
Thank you, Dan. It's been an absolute honor to come on today and to be able to share my story and my journey.